Hey everyone, welcome to this new edition of the Animated Girls Profiles Confidential. And this might seem like a strange one to talk about, but we're going to talk about Liz Wilson. Now, in case you guys don't know who that is, Liz Wilson is the girlfriend, love interest of Jon Arbuckle in the Garfield series. Now, Liz didn't debut right off the start like everybody else did. No. They introduced her, I think, a few years later. Or several years later. I can't really recall. Hey, I was just a kid when Garfield came out. I was just a baby, or not. In fact, I wasn't even born. I think I was just barely born when Garfield came out or something. I don't really know. But yeah, Liz wasn't introduced into the fold until about, I think, several years later or something. The reasoning, I think, I believe, and I'm just going off the top of my head here, the reasoning Liz was introduced was to give Jon a love interest, kind of a goal to achieve. Now, the way she was portrayed at first was basically she was kind of a reluctant love interest for Jon. Let's put it this way. I mean, if you read the comics day after day in your daily newspaper, or you would wait to read them in the Sunday funnies in your Sunday newspaper, you would see that Jon did whatever he could to get Liz to go out with him. He would try every attempt. Some would be successful, some wouldn't be. I guess you can acquit, or I guess you can compare Liz when she first came out, or when she first debuted, as sort of being the equivalent of almost what olive oil was in the eyes of many fans. And I apologize for the wind here. Olive oil, basically, if you watch the classic Popeye cartoons and all that, in the eyes of many fans, was one of the most, despised love interest that any main hero character could have. And what I mean by despised, basically she's the kind of character that, well, quite frankly, fans nowadays would call a whore. Let's put it that way. I'm not trying to be mean, but that's how fans would look at olive oil in the classic Popeye cartoons. Like, oh, she's not interested in Popeye yet. She's his girlfriend, and she'd rather be with this guy or that guy. And it's like, to them, she's like basically a whore. She's a slut. She's a bitch, if you will. And going off the top of my head, like I said, I think that's how some fans would equivalent the debut of Liz Wilson, the first few years or something like that of Liz's existence, as being almost similar to that. Almost similar, because even though she reluctantly didn't want to be around Jon, or even date him, she would go out with him. And in the end, she would find out that it was probably the best, and in the end, she would find out it was the best option she had, or the best thing she could have done, because true, in the comics and even in the cartoons, Jon's not the most sophisticated guy, or the most, how do I put it? He's not the most sophisticated or the smartest of characters, but, he does have his points. He does have things about him that ladies would like. And, Liz is, like I said, it's kind of like the olive at the time. And throughout the years, they would still And at times they would slowly play on that a little bit more. She'd still be reluctant. I mean, one of her bigger roles, if you will, one of the bigger roles that she had was in the Thanksgiving special. And she would also be a semi-reoccurring character in the Garfield and Friends show, and I mean semi-reoccurring because she would appear every now and then, depending on what the story situation called for. And she would basically, be there, like I said, for the, to enhance the plot for that 7-minute short, 7 to 8 minutes short. Now, the one thing about the character, though, in relation to Jon Arbuckle, is, Jon at times does realize that, okay, maybe, Liz, he realizes in his heart and in his mind that, yeah, Liz likes him, but, it's like she's not ready to go to that next stage yet for him. She's not ready to commit to somebody just yet, and that maybe there are some qualities about him that, make Liz just look at him as a friend, look at him as being disinterested, or disinteresting, or whatever you want to call it. And that's a great playoff between two characters, because you have one that's like, you have one in Liz that, she looks at Jon as just a friend and as a person that loves to take care of animals and everything, especially his cat and his dog. But she's also, I guess you could say, mature enough to realize that this guy also has the hots for her, but she's not ready for that. She's more focused on her job. She's more of a career woman than anything else. And then, like I say, a good playoff to that with Jon is the fact that Jon realizes, there are some things about him that maybe he needs to fix, about himself that he needs to fix. And sometimes he doesn't realize that until almost it's too late. Again, going back to the Thanksgiving special, it's a prime example. In the Thanksgiving special, Liz reluctantly agrees to have Thanksgiving dinner with him, and he's so infatuated with going out with Liz that he doesn't properly make the Thanksgiving turkey the way it should be. He doesn't make the Thanksgiving dinner the way it should be. Hold on for a sec. Like I said, he doesn't make the Thanksgiving dinner the way it should be. And he has to rely on his grandma, his rocking grandma, if you will, to save the day. Well, he basically has to distract, in a very boring fashion, Liz from entering the kitchen and finding out that basically he screwed up. And like I said, that's one of these situations to where, even if it's a little too late, or almost too late, Jon realizes, crap, I've ruined everything, and I got to find a way to fix this. So, like I said, he finds that way in his grandma by calling up his rocking grandma to come help prepare dinner for him. And that was the person that did that on purpose. But to fix dinner for him, to save his neck and try to keep the relationship going to try to keep the possibility of a relationship with Liz opened up, have that door, constantly still open. So, again, it's a great playoff between two characters, because in a sense, Liz knows that Jon has a good heart and he means well, but there are just some things about him that in the first, I could say, decade and a half or so, she kind of made her keep her distance as just being a friend and sort of a on and off love interest, and that was it. And it wasn't until, and this is my opinion, and like I said, this is my opinion, it wasn't until the live action movie came out that things kind of changed. I think it was, who was it? Jennifer Love Hewitt, I believe, was in the movie as Liz. it wasn't until the movie came out that Liz was portrayed as someone that, as we found out towards the end, because they did kind of play off the fact that there was that attraction, and and it was through Garfield's eyes and everything. And there was a little bit of the reference to Jon kind of being like that too, of not showing exactly where Liz would be coming from if Jon decided to ask her out. And again, and again, like I said, Jon basically, and again, there was some good references there. And again, it wasn't until the end of the movie that we found out that Liz, well, the movie incarnation of Liz, actually had always been attracted to Jon. She always wanted to be around him. She always wanted to be with him. And thus, she ended up, at the end of the film, in a relationship with him. And it's like, and some people did judge that. They're like, well, wait a minute. Usually she's reluctant to be with him, and yet right off the bat she wants to be? This whole time she wants to be? Like, where did this come from? That's how some people felt about it. And that basically, to me, started something that a lot of fans obviously, I guess, have been wanting to see. You see, Jim Davis, I think, along with the people that worked on the comic and the cartoons, and even the movie, they kind of did a poll or something, or a survey, if you will, asking the people, okay, what would you like to see the most? And through this survey, this poll, if you will, they said, give Jon a life. Give Jon a life. In other words, make him and Liz a couple. And and that's what they did. It was through this, ironically, it was after the first movie that I think they came out with this poll, this survey asking, what do you want us to do with Jon? What would you like to see happen? And a lot of people said, give Jon a life. In other words, let him finally achieve his goal of being with Liz. Not just in the movies, but in all incarnations. And that's what they did. It happened in the comics. I don't know when, what year. And it's reflected on into the new cartoon series that was on Cartoon Network. So, yeah, for the character of Liz Wilson, a lot of things came full circle. So now she's the official love interest, girlfriend of Jon Arbuckle. She's not disinterested in Jon anymore. She's interested. She's now around him a lot more. So like I said, she's his girlfriend and love interest, and it's all because the fans said, hey, give him a life, and that's what they did. So but overall, I've actually thoroughly enjoyed the Liz character. I mean, I thought she was pretty good, pretty cool, and I don't think any more could be said about that. I mean, I don't think any more could be said about that. So that's the, like I said, I don't think there's any more that can be said about that. So that's, again, I've always liked the character. I thought she was at times a sassy, if not sarcastic character that was a good playoff, a good foil for Jon, and vice versa. So yeah, I thought it worked. I actually enjoyed the character. So that's all I have to say on Liz Wilson on this edition of the Animated Girl Profiles Confidentials. Animated Girl Profiles Confidentials.